Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar where we'll be taking a look at how to make the most of your CDP submission, the changes for 2015 and also what's coming up in 2016. My name is Stephen Kennett and I look after the Energy and Carbon Management channel here at 2 Degrees. I'm delighted to welcome our presenters today. Joining us from Carbon Clear we have Henry Garthwaite, who brings a wealth of experience in carbon and sustainability management. And we're also very fortunate to be joined by Maya Kuttner, Director of Technical Reporting at CDP. Today's presentations will last for around 30 to 35 minutes, which will leave us with a good 10 to 15 minutes for questions at the end. If you have a question you'd like to ask, then please post it in the Q&A box on the bottom right-hand side of the screen and then press send, and we'll wait till the end before answering as many as we can. As an aside, if you should have any technical issues when you're listening to the webinar, please use the chat box on the right-hand side to send me a message, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So without any further delay, I'll hand over to Henry, who will get us started with today's webinar. So Henry, over to you.
Stephen, thank you very much, and I hope everybody can hear. Firstly, we're delighted that we've been asked to run this webinar on the CDP, and that we're also doing it in partnership with the CDP, with Maya. So thank you very much for that, and thank you all for listening in and watching as well. I'm just going to give a very brief introduction to Carbon Clear, just so that you are all aware of us. And actually I'm going to start on the bottom left-hand corner of the page. You will see that we are a CDP accredited provider. We've been a consultancy partner of the CDP now for 3 years in a row, and are delighted to continue to work closely with the CDP. And we as an organisation have been around now since about 2005, and our core focus really is on getting a systematic approach for organisations to help them manage their carbon and manage their energy and other sustainability impacts. And we do this with the prime objective of making the organisation more efficient and effective than it is when we are first introduced to them. And as a result of that focus, despite the fact that we are a reasonably small team, we've got a wealth of experience, huge amounts of capability across those areas, and now work with a large number of blue chip clients, including about 10% of the FTSE 100. And we work with a broad range of organisations, helping them with their CDP returns. However, I know that you're also going to be interested in the CDP process, what has changed and how to get the most of what you are going to be doing for the CDP. And so our agenda, very briefly, is to cover the disclosures process and the changes made to the reporting requirements for 2015 that Maya is going to be covering shortly, before I then come back to you to talk about how to respond to the questionnaire itself. And we will have time at the end for questions, as Stephen has already mentioned. So if you have any as we go through or at the end, please put them in the chat box, and we'll be delighted to get back to you on them either during the webinar or afterwards if we don't have time for all of those questions. But actually, without any further ado, what I would like to do is to hand over to Maya, the Director of Technical Reporting for the CDP, to talk about the disclosure process and the changes made to the reporting requirements for 2015. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very good to be here today. Hello, everyone. I am responsible for developing CDP's company questionnaires. And what I will talk to you about today is, first of all, I'll provide a brief introduction to CDP. I will then move on to talk about the changes to the climate change questionnaire in 2015. I will then go over some top tips for you to consider while working on your CDP disclosure. And then finally, I'll say a few words about what to expect in the future in 2016 and beyond. So CDP is a non-for-profit organization focusing on environmental sustainability specifically. Our vision is a global economic system that operates within sustainable environmental boundaries and prevents dangerous climate change. We focus on 3 environmental areas: climate change, water, and deforestation, and how these interact with business and investment. That takes us to CDP's mission, which is to transform the global economic system to prevent dangerous climate change and value natural resources. And we do this by putting information at the heart of business, investment, and policy decisions. So we develop metrics for environmental reporting in the form of our questionnaires, who hopefully most of you would be familiar with to some extent. And since 2000, we've been collecting information from companies on behalf of investors and also on behalf of large procuring organizations. So we collect data on climate change, water, and forests from listed companies, suppliers, and also cities. These are all issues that are impacting businesses already, and in future they will be felt more and more. So here are just a few examples. Coca-Cola was asked to close down a bottling plant in northern India due to water issues. Toyota in 2015, its profits were hit due to severe disruptions to supply chain resulting from floods in Thailand, which are the type of things that we will see happening more frequently and with more intensity due to climate change in the future. Wilmar International, one of the world's biggest palm oil companies, has been targeted by NGOs for its contribution to deforestation in Indonesia and has pledged to a no deforestation policy. So those are just a few examples. Here you can see the growing investor base. So in February, we sent you the request for information on climate change on behalf of 822 institutional investors with $95 trillion of assets under management. And in terms of disclosing companies, you can see that this has also grown. We started very small with just about 200 companies responding to us back in 2003, but today we have almost 5,000 companies worldwide reporting on climate change to their stakeholders through CDP. So why reporting? The reporting process as we see it is an iterative process of learning whereby CDP requests information and provides feedback, but the rest is really up to you and your stakeholders. And the other process that drives change is data sharing. So we request information on behalf of your stakeholders, and then we share it with them. There are many ways in which we share the data with investors and with your customers. One way the data is made available to investors is through the Bloomberg terminal. You can see a screenshot here on the screen. This is a tool that's widely used by the investment community. CDP also works to make corporate reporting more efficient and effective by working with other organizations to drive alignment in environmental reporting requirements. For example, we collaborate with RobecoSAM, who compiled the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. This collaboration led them to change their climate change questions and align them with CDP's. Another example is our collaboration with GRI. We were actively involved in the consultation process around the G4 guidelines, and as a result, there's almost complete alignment in our energy and climate change KPIs. And in addition, we create mapping documents that companies can use to see how a response formulated for the purpose of one framework can be used for the other framework as well. And we've done this for water and climate change. Okay, so now moving on to this year's climate change questionnaire. So the questionnaire that hopefully many of you will be working on at the moment. So in terms of the information request structure, in our climate change program, we reach out to companies on behalf of investors, and we also have a supply chain program. In both of these programs, companies are asked to provide information relevant to climate change. The questionnaire is sent in both of these programs, and the questionnaire has 3 overlapping modules, which we refer to as the core climate change questionnaire, which you can see here in the middle in red. So the topics covered here in the core climate change questionnaire are topics around management, risks and opportunities, and greenhouse gas emissions. In addition, companies responding to CDP's climate change information requests might be asked to respond to a sector-specific module, shown in dark purple on the slide. So we've developed several sector-specific modules, including a module for oil and gas companies, for electric utilities, for auto companies, for information technology, ICT companies, and for food, beverage, and tobacco companies as well. On the supply chain side, in addition to the core climate change questionnaire, companies are also asked to respond to the supplier module, which is shown in orange on the side. So the official deadline for the investor request for climate change this year has changed and is now June 30th. Last year it was the end of May. So this is the same deadline, June 30th, as our water and forest information requests as well. So please know that this is an absolute deadline with no extensions that are going to be granted. So just something to be aware of. And for the supply chain information request, the deadline is July 31st. We made a decision a few years back to minimize the changes in the climate change questionnaire as much as possible. So we do have to introduce changes sometimes, and these are the principles that we follow to introduce changes. The changes must mean that the data is more relevant to stakeholders. The changes reflect developments in environmental reporting. They improve the quality of the data. They make disclosure easier. They enable us to automate the scoring process, which has become very, very large over the past few years. And finally, these support the realization of one or more of CDP's strategic objectives. The charts here on the screen displays the areas of changes in the questionnaire, in the climate change questionnaire in 2015. So areas in light gray have not been changed very much in terms of data points. There might have been a slight tweak in wording, which you will see, or some additional drop-down values, but the questions essentially are the same. In terms of dark gray, these are minor changes, but on a whole, again, the intent of the question it has not changed. The only moderate change is in the strategy section, highlighted in purple, where you will see some additional new questions, which I will present to you. In terms of scoring and the changes in 2015, the main areas of climate change scoring are that there's more performance points available on climate change risk and opportunities management, long-term risk assessment, climate change integration into the business strategy, and reduction in intensity metrics. Also, there's changes in how we score Scope 1 and 2 verification. So I'll now go through some of the moderate changes in the actual questions and also touch on scoring a little bit. So I'll just give you a second to look at this slide. So here is one of the questions that was slightly amended for the purpose of facilitating analysis. So here, really, the third column has become a drop-down column. And the scoring is more specific, but it hasn't really changed in meaning. And other than that, the question hasn't changed. So this is the question on governance, asking companies to specify whether they provide incentives for the management of climate change issues. Okay, the second area of change is on internal price of carbon. Due to growing investor interest in carbon pricing, CDP has added 2 questions on companies' use of an internal carbon price. This will enable CDP to draw more specific information on this topic and provide it to investors as they're increasingly expressing an interest in this. So you can see the questions on this slide. Does your company use an internal price of carbon? And please provide details and examples. And here you're encouraged to provide specific examples. So this is a new question and it will not be scored. This is another new question. So you may know that the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Paris, otherwise known as COP21, is expected to take place in December of this year. A successful agreement is really a key opportunity to agree on a framework to limit global warming to below 2 degrees Celsius, which signifies the accepted kind of threshold for dangerous climate change. And an ambitious international response is essential if businesses are to transition to and prosper in a low-carbon economy. So really this agreement can only be possible if a strong message of support originates from the leaders, also leaders in the business community, and if this message reaches governments and policymakers worldwide. So to provide information to investors and other stakeholders on companies' policies and approaches to an international agreement between governments on climate change, we've introduced these questions. They will be in the questionnaire for this year only, and they will not be scored. Moving on to the question on emission reduction initiatives. The main question has not changed. We've made a few tweaks to the table. We've added several new columns. These 2 columns on the scope and whether the emission reduction activity is voluntary or mandatory, these aren't actually new data points. They were data points that were previously requested in a text field, so now they've just been structured. And there's some changes to the scoring here. And again, the full details on the scoring methodology are all available in CDP's website in the full scoring methodology, which is publicly available. So through this question on communications, which we've been asking for a few years, we would like to provide investors with information on companies' use of CDSB's framework, the Climate Disclosure Standards Board framework, when reporting climate change information in their mainstream financial reports. And for that reason, we've added a value to reflect this framework, and we've restructured the table. And the scoring hasn't changed. It changed in the sense that it's also scoring this new value now, but other than that, it remains the same as it was last year. It has been, however, there's been a clarification included in the scoring methodology that the documents that companies attach in response to this question must refer to both greenhouse gas emissions and the organization's response to climate change. Moving on to verification. So before I speak about changes, just a quick reminder that in previous years, the type of verification or assurance, the page and section reference, the relevant standard, and proportion of reported emissions verified all had to be completed to earn any disclosure points for all the 3 scopes, so not only 1, 2, but also 3. So this is in questions 8.6, 8.7, and 14.2. So the new requirements in 2015 pertain to scope 1 and 2 verification specifically. So in this slide, I'm demonstrating these questions with 8.6. However, please note that the changes are also applicable to question 8.7 on scope 2. So firstly, we will assess the proportion of scope 1 and 2 emissions that have been covered by verification. So this is the last column of the top table shown by the green arrow. For full points, a total of 70% of the emissions in each scope must be verified. So this is for full performance points. In addition, the response to question 8.4 will be checked. So that refers to the second table shown in the blue arrows. If there are relevant emissions that have been excluded from the inventory or have not been evaluated, then full points will not be awarded for verification. And again, all the full information is available in our scoring methodology. In terms of emissions performance, which refers to a specific question that you see here in the screen, there's a new requirement that is designed to give confidence to data users that this question has been answered correctly. So historically, we have seen some answers where we strongly suspect that there's been a miscalculation involved, but it has been difficult to check this. So as a result, this year we're asking companies to provide an overview of the calculation they performed to calculate their emission reductions from emission reduction activities specifically. So if the first row has an emissions value, then a comment must also be provided for the first row, which presents the figure that were used to calculate the change due to emission reduction activities. So here in the comments fields, which is column 4 that you will see, you will be asked to provide some information, which is specified in the guidance and in the scoring methodology. And now just a few top tips. Do review the changes document for 2015. This is a document that we publish every year that specifies all the changes that we've introduced both to the questionnaire and to the scoring methodology, just kind of in a quick summary. That's available on our climate change guidance webpage. In addition, make sure to use the guidance documents, which is also available on the same page. There's a copy from last year button in the online response system. So if you responded last year, many of the questions are eligible for pre-population, and that could help you put together your response and save you some time. Also, with regards to scoring, bear in mind that cross-references to other questions are not scored. Neither are links to external websites because these can expire. In addition, use the main fields provided for your response and not the further information fields. And finally, note that 4 question request attachments, actually. So these 4 questions, you're asked to provide an attachment. And these will only be checked if they're provided in the right part of the response, so within the question itself, within the table itself. Okay, so finally I wanted also to give you some insight into the changes that we're planning for 2016 and beyond, or at least some of the areas of change. We will start with a change to how scores will be communicated. So again, just to clarify that the changes I'll be talking about now won't be happening this year, but next year. So not this time around, not this year when you respond to CDP, but 2016. So here on the screen, you can see an example of the way we communicate scores today. So this is just an example of a disclosure score and of a performance score. And here you can see the disclosure score is a number up to 100, and the performance score is communicated as a letter. So from 2016, again, not this year or not this disclosure, but the one after that, a company will get 1 score. It will not get 2 separate scores. So you might know that in addition to climate change, we now work on water and forest scoring as well. And our long-term vision is to communicate results across all these 3 programs in a streamlined and aligned format. And we also want to see a score that is really intuitive and allows a company to tell a story about its development. So instead of the traditional scoring structure that you would have seen this year and in previous years as well, we plan to score companies on 4 different types of of levels of performance. So for disclosure, for awareness, for management, and for leadership. And I'll explain how that will work in the future. So here we really have a schematic illustration of how this will work. So the most important thing here, or the key feature of this new scoring system, is that a company will have to pass a certain threshold to move up to the next level. So to move from disclosure up to awareness, then to management, and finally to leadership. So we'll start off by scoring for disclosure, and this will be broadly the same as the approach that we currently have for disclosure scoring. So it will be about looking at transparency. Has a company completed responses? Then the next level, which will be awareness, aims to recognize companies that have assessed and understand how direct and indirect impact of climate change can impact their organization, and also the organization's own role in mitigating and adapting to climate change. Then the next level will be management, that will look to incentivize relevant actions or reward proxy indicators that suggest that such actions have been successful. And finally, the leadership level, this will reflect the actions that will be considered as an example of best practice behavior. So just to explain again, is that there will no longer be a number for disclosure and a letter for performance. There'll just be one letter representing the company's stage of development with regards to climate change. Now, in terms of what you can be expecting to see on the questionnaire side of things. So here are a few areas. The first one is accounting and reporting on Scope 2 emissions. So here we're planning to introduce some changes in next year's questionnaire in 2016 to align with the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, and the detailed suggestions of what these changes might look like will be available on our website in September during our public consultation. So I do encourage you to have a look at that and give us your feedback. In addition, we're developing a methodology that would help you and other companies set science-based targets, and we want companies to be able to kind of reflect this in their response, telling their investors that they have set science-based targets. So again, we're looking here at the targets questions to see how we can adapt them to be able to capture that information. In addition, on verification and assurance, we're not planning any changes next year, but it's kind of a longer-term thing that we're always thinking about how to raise the bar. And also our sector approach. So we're focusing on the oil and gas sector this year and piloting a sector-specific scoring methodology. And in future, we hope to start working with other high-impact sectors as well, the next one being electric utilities. So please do keep an eye on our website for more information on any of these topics, specifically, like I said, during the first 3 weeks of September when we hold our online public consultation on all the proposed future changes to the questionnaire. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Maya. Really useful insight there, and I would certainly encourage everybody to go back over those top tips for this year to make sure that that you do actually address those and understand them. So thank you very much for that, and also for the insight on where CDP is going to be going in future, which I'm sure is something that we're all interested in. So what I now want to do is to move on to the next part of the agenda, which is about responding successfully to the 2015 questionnaires. And we'll then have our question and answer session after that. I've seen there have been a couple of questions posted. More than happy to accept any others that come through. So if we have a look at the 2015 CDP scoring potential, what we've done here is to just plot out the disclosure and performance points that were awarded in 2014 and 2015, and the minimum and maximum is specific to the question paths that there are through CDP. So in order to be able to complete a CDP return, you follow a series of questions, and the path is driven by some of those answers. The minimum that you will be marked out of having completed one of these is the minimum we've recorded, and the maximum obviously is the maximum that is recorded. And what I'm going to be doing is talking about where the additional points are for 2015, but obviously that is subject to those points being available to you should you have gone down that question path. And in terms of Carbon Clear, I mean, this is something that we have worked hard on to understand and to help our clients with. And in fact, in 2014, with the 2014 disclosure, on average, the clients we worked with achieved an increase of 13 points over their 2013 score, which was a great result. And in fact, we helped one large financial services company reach the CPLI for the first time. So there is value in actually looking at this level of detail and finding where those extra points are, especially if they're ones that you can take advantage of when it comes to the response itself. So we've gone through, and Maya has indicated some of those areas where there is effectively no change or limited change. It may just be additional drop-down areas, drop-down options. The second then was the minor changes, and the third was the moderate changes. If we start with the moderate changes on strategy, and looking at those specific points, we can see that there are performance points awarded for organizations that can come out with active examples of detail for business strategies that have been influenced, and also for business decisions that have been made as a result of climate change. And for those, what are the key things that you need to think about doing? The first is to assess all of those risks. Second is to make sure that you've got the reduction targets. And then the third is that you've got a case study of that specific area within the strategy piece. So what we're talking about here is examples of action, not words. That's the key. It's got to be something that you have done, action that you have taken, and examples of decisions that have been made. That is what is really going to get you those additional points. So well worth going into that detail. When it comes to the risks and opportunities section, there are a reasonably significant number of extra performance points here. It turns out that there are fewer disclosure points because the performance area is deemed to be more important around risks and opportunities. And this really is being driven by a need for organizations to understand the changes and the risks involved in terms of regulation, physical climate change, and other climate change related factors. Again, if we look at each one of those, how do you get the points? Yes, there are changes from last year. So make sure you don't just copy forward your response from last year and assume that it is correct. There are more drop-down options. There are more points to be gained by providing more detail when it comes to examples and case studies. Again, I'm going to use that phrase of make sure that there's evidence of action, not words. And engagement with the board and the management team is equally as useful. So got to make sure that the details are actually there. When it comes to the emission section, although there are no changes in terms of the questions, there are additional disclosure points awarded and additional performance points awarded. And this is for providing additional information over and above that was provided last year. And this is all about auditability of the information that you are providing. So if you describe the sources for those emission factors and for global warming potentials that you've used and reference them, then you can get those extra points. And on the disclosure side. And on the performance side, there needs to be the evidence of a positive performance. In other words, a reduction in your emissions, and evidence that that has actually happened as a result of action you've taken for that specific purpose. So when it comes to the detail of how to get the points, clearly reasonably simple in terms of disclosing GWPs and sources for emission factors. That is just a case of providing the detail that is required. And when it comes to the performance points, again, that detail needs to be there so that your scorer can see that you are taking action and that action is having a positive impact in terms of your emissions and the results. The next area is engagement. And there are 2 extra performance points, should that be a question path that you go down, for the senior level sign-off of the response. Every response always had to be signed off, but now CDP scoring is looking for the seniority of that sign-off. So, key here, make sure you get somebody senior to actually sign it off. Find the person who's got the highest responsibility for climate change, and make sure that you've got buy-in to do that. It is unlikely that you're going to be able to go up to them the day before you submit and say, please can you sign this off, when they don't know the detail, they don't know why they need to. And so if you leave it until the last moment to ask for that, then it is going to be quite a challenge. But as with all of these things, if you can provide the right answers, if you can get the right people engaged and involved, A, it will help you overall anyway in terms of any action that you're taking, and B, in this case, there's the potential for those 2 extra performance points for your CDP return. And Maya also talked about 2 areas that, or some areas that are not going to be scored, but there are questions asked about those. The first one is around carbon pricing, and we're finding more and more organizations are actually doing internal carbon pricing anyway, based on their carbon inventories, and that is being taken forward into future decision making. And looking at the long-term strategies that organizations have got. So for a lot of organizations, it's already having a positive impact. Key then is, why would an organization actually want to do that? And there are 2 key things that come out of this. First is that it helps people, if you are publicly disclosing that, to understand that you take this seriously, to understand that you know what is going on, you understand the risks and the opportunities, and are factoring these sorts of things into your standard decision-making process. And then the second is that it drives emission reduction. If you are taking account of that cost as a genuine cost, then it will impact behaviors within the organization. Whether people understand the complexities of climate change and carbon pricing actually doesn't matter. It is an additional cost to a project that they, or to project options that they have, and therefore there's a decision to make about those. And then lastly, as already been mentioned with the conference of the COP21 Conference of the Parties, there is value seen in understanding what the board's position is on that, and making sure that there is alignment between your board and the COP decisions and what that is actually going to mean to the business. And just be careful on this, because remember that the CDP response is available to organizations, so you've got to make sure that what you're saying in it is actually being is also in alignment with what you are publishing publicly anyway. So we've gone through the detail of where some of the scoring is changing and those new questions, and why it is important to actually respond to those, and why it is important to think about the way you respond to those. But actually there's a broad number of other factors that you need to remember when it comes to your CDP return. And that is, remember that this work is up for public scrutiny. Organizations can go in and find out, individuals, other stakeholders can go in and find out what you have said about yourselves in terms of your CDP response. You need to be able to respond to the question. No answer for some of these questions is not seen as a good thing. And remember that there's a large investor community that is looking at this detail. And when it comes down to the detail, the devil is in the detail. Make sure you've got the right pieces of information in there and available. And as we've already said, a lot of this is more about action than words now. And sometimes the story is as important as the words, to make sure that there's a good narrative there to lead the response through, so everybody can build up a good strong picture about the activities that are going on, the actions that are going on, the concern about the risks, and also the evidence that the organisation is adapting and adopting some of those opportunities. And then the last two, which are in some respects more important, is to make sure you develop a project plan for the work. We've already talked about the fact that the deadline is fixed, and in fact, for the investor, water and forests CDP return, there's 43 working days to go. That's not very long. For supply chain, it's more like 60 days. So make sure that you've got a project plan in place. And apologies, I think the last bullet point is fallen off the bottom of the slide, and that is that if you need to contact us now. We can help provide support, advice, and a range of other services that can help organizations either at a very high level so that they can go off and do the work, or actually reasonably intensively so that we can help do the work that is needed to ensure that your CDP return says the full story, gives the full picture about your organization, and helps you achieve the highest score that you can. Hold on, sorry. There you go. So make sure you contact us if you need to. Okay. So I hope that helps. We've now been through a great presentation with lots of detail from Maya about the disclosure process and the changes made to the reporting requirements. I hope I've given you some insight as to how to successfully respond to the questionnaire, especially with regards to those changes. And what we'd now like to do is open up for questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Henry, and thank you, Maya, for your presentations today. So we've now got about 10 minutes for questions, and we've had plenty sent in, but also please do keep sending them in if you've got other questions. So maybe something to begin with. So we've had several questions come in around the internal carbon price. So Maya, maybe a question which you could pick up on first, but do you foresee the internal carbon price becoming scored? And also, is its inclusion an indication that this is a route that a lot of larger organizations are now going down?
Hi. Yes, I'll get that. So thanks for those questions. First of all, I'll answer the second one. about whether it's an indication that this is a route that many large organizations are going by. And I will say that, yes, you might have seen a report that we published looking at large companies based in the U.S. That have been talking about the setting an internal price of carbon and how they use this tool to manage climate change within the company. And if you haven't seen that, that's available for download on the CDP website. In addition, there is a Road to Paris campaign that CDP, together with a few other kind of business-oriented NGOs, are running with and there's a specific commitment around an internal price of carbon, also involving the World Bank. So by all means, we're seeing that this is becoming a widespread approach to adopt. Now, in terms of whether it's going to be scored, I will say that this depends. So usually when we include new questions, eventually they're scored at least for disclosure, so rewarding companies that provide an answer. And this will depend on the future of this question. So as I told you before, I'm responsible for developing these questions. So what I will do once I get the 2015 data, I'll do some analysis to see what kind of responses we get in response to this question. And I'll try to evaluate, well, is this an area that is equally as applicable to all sectors? We already know that no, for certain sectors it's more relevant than others, etc. And then if we decide to keep it in the questionnaire, then I do foresee that at least with time, it'll be disclosure scored at the very least. So it really depends on whether we keep it or not. But all this information, whether it is continued to be included or not, will be available in the September consultation.
And I would agree with Maya in terms of the number of organisations that are looking at cost of carbon, and remembering that we've got many clients who do respond to the CDP, but actually lots who don't. Large private organisations and smaller organisations, we're seeing more and more starting to either implement cost of carbon calculations in business decision making, or looking at how they can start to think about that. And that's something that we've helped a number of organisations embed within the corporate decision making process.
Thanks, Henry. This might be sort of slightly hypothetical, but somebody's asking, how would you account for the fact of differences of internal carbon pricing, such as Microsoft, it's $4 to $6, well, Shell, it's $40. Maya, have you got any sort of views on that?
Yeah, so I mean, this varies largely by geography as well. I mean, there are certain companies in certain sectors and geographies that already have to put a price on carbon, and others that are kind of forecasting. So it really, really depends on the signals that they're getting from policymakers, on how feasible it is to, how much the scenario of having an actual price on carbon is will materialize for that specific company. So that's one explanation. And Henry, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Well, just taking it from a slightly different perspective, as soon as you start looking at water and you look at water scarcity, obviously that impacts different geographies in very different ways as to whether there is an issue or not. And if internal costs of carbon are higher or lower, even within a single organisation, as long as there's a good logic as to why that is the case, then I don't see any reason why that should be seen as an issue, because it is just about it's about balancing the impact of an organisation. Although at the same time, I appreciate that it may drive occasionally some slightly funny decision making within organisations, but we can only work on the best information that we've got to make decisions. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about us here or Microsoft or Shell or anybody else.
Thanks, Henry. We've got a question here around case studies. Henry, you might want to pick this up, but someone's asking, do we mention them within answers to each individual question, or mainly list them in question 3.3 around initiatives?
Well, actually, I would. It would be great if Maya could comment on this as well. But she's already talked about the fact that there's no cross-referencing of information or links back to websites used. I would make sure that in terms of answering questions, if you think it is relevant and is going to be valuable, then make sure that there is at least some information on a relevant case study in those areas where you think it is sensible. That doesn't mean you need pages and pages of detail, but I think as long as you can encapsulate the critical details, and if there's financial information about the impact of that case study, if there's detail about the action you've taken, rather than just we are thinking about doing this, as I said before, actions not words, then that can only help.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that just have a look at the guidance document, the scoring methodology that specifies exactly what information is expected of you in answer to each one of the questions.
Thanks, Maya. Another question here. In the new scoring system, what are examples of the kinds of initiatives or competencies that equate to leadership? So is it around sort of monetary incentives for environmental improvements across all employees or at board level? Maya, do you have some examples?
Well, we haven't developed that scoring system yet, but I expect that in terms of the leadership criteria, they'll be very similar to the types of criteria that we incentivize at the moment for performance leadership. So things like, emissions due to emission reduction activities and governance, good targets, all the things that you would see now.
Great, thanks, Maya. Also, you talked about the sector-specific modules which are being developed. Someone's asking, have you got others lined up for the future?
So our plan for the future is really to do more with the sector-specific modules that we have and develop some further, basically based on our ability to do that and expand to those areas. So at the moment, like I said, we're focusing on oil and gas. In the future, the next step is to look at electric utilities. We already have an electric utilities module, but the steps there would be to really have a deeper review of it and see whether we can also create and pilot a scoring methodology that is specific for that sector. And then after that, other priority sectors would be transportation, materials, and eventually financials. But I think this will be a gradual approach that will take several years to develop. And of course, at the same time, we're still running the usual system that we're running.
Thanks, Maya. So I think we've got time for a couple more questions. And one, somebody's asking, how does one discriminate between one performer and another in the same sector? For example, if Sprint performs better than AT&T in their CDP scores, how is that evident in the new scoring methodology? Maya, do you want to pick that one up?
Yes, just to clarify the scoring methodology, that the new scoring methodology won't be implemented until 2016. So this is actually quite important. And in terms of the specific letters I communicated, that's still subject to some review and change. But generally speaking, it could be that one company in a sector only gets to disclosure and another company gets to leadership, and in which case it would be very clear how to compare between the two. So the idea is that each company will make it to the level to the level that represents its stage of maturity. So there'll be 4 levels. So one company can potentially only get to the disclosure level, or the awareness level, or the management level, or the leadership level, which will be reflected by a letter.
Great, thanks, Maya. And one final question here. How can we find out where we missed out on points last year? We'll miss out on points this year if our return doesn't materially change. Maya, do you want to pick that one up first?
So here I would say that CDP provides a score feedback call, which it runs normally a few months after the data is made publicly available. So I don't know whether you had that call and received feedback on your response, but then you would receive feedback on specific areas of the questionnaire. It wouldn't go to the question level. So anything beyond that would really require you to go through the response, or I suppose working with a consultant to help you do that.
Yeah, and I'm happy to comment here as well, as that there is a performance review report that Maya has mentioned, which certainly gives you a high level view as to your performance and also areas for potential improvement. In addition to that, actually, we've worked closely with a number of organisations to do things like reviewing their prior performance, reviewing their previous disclosure against not only that year's scoring, so 2014 against 2014 scoring, but also to review their disclosure in 2014 against the 2015 scoring to see where additional work may need to be done to not only improve the response for the detail that they gave last year, but also to make sure that they can take full advantage of those question paths and the additional points that are available. And in some cases, they've actually asked us to do that and to do a little bit of benchmarking against their sector to find out what it is additionally that they should do to improve their performance. And I think that the benefit of doing things like that is shown through the comment I made earlier that on average clients we've worked with have improved their scores by 13 points last year. So if that is something that you are interested in, then get in contact with us. The performance report that comes back from CDP takes you so far. If that is enough for you, great. If you do need more support, then do give us a call.
Great. Thank you, Henry. So we're going to draw today's session to an end now, but I'd like to thank Henry and Maya for their time today and for getting through so many questions, and also for everyone who's joined us for this webinar. Just to remind you all, a recording of the webinar and the presentation slides will be archived on the 2 Degrees platform, and as soon as these go live, we'll send out an email with the links to those. So I hope you found today useful and informative, and that you'll be able to join us for more webinars in the coming months. So thank you, everyone.